Just gave the fifth sitting, day 5 sitting, as the precept or conduit for the sitting. And I started the sitting and I just went out. 5 minutes in, came back, was out of it, like just kind of, I was just, I was awake, but I was, just basically gone. I still feel it now. Some Amazon dude, I hope it's an Amazon dude, came by blaring rap music, right? Like with a bad sound system. Was out there, I don't know what, I would have got up and looked normally. I was just, it started at the end of the sitting and then I just, whatever. And so these sittings have been amazing, just very deep transmission. I could just feel it now. I'm like, I got work to do. I got a video to finish. I got some stuff to do outside, which I actually want to do, but I'm just really not all there. So that's good. That's happened. Anyways, I'll I'll check back in, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do reaction to the stuff tonight, and then to taking the sitting tonight, and then all the rest of the commentary I'm gonna put into one video that'll go up most likely on Wednesday. That's my day off for my other channel, for my main channel. So there's 2 more sittings to go, or 3 more sittings, 6, 7, no, 2 more to go. And then, I'll do my, my final thoughts about the gathering. But it's just been amazing sitting, so that's great. So I ended up doing a long voiceover for, I believe, the 5th sitting or 6th sitting, between the 5th and 6th sittings. It's like a 45-minute voiceover. Then I did a follow-up, like 5-minute audio, and then, I posted it in a regular video on my YouTube channel, Pockets of the Future channel. And then also it's going in the Journey series. And I wanted to, include something with that I put in the video. So I'm including it in my Journey series and on this Gratefullness meditation channel. So here is the clip followed by the voiceovers. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Today is Sunday, March 29th. This video will be going up tomorrow at 2 p.m. on Monday. And I'll start this video off a little bit differently, and I have a sort of epic voiceover from my Gratefullness meditation and Journey series that talks about, why you keep on going when you're fighting a losing battle, right? When things are going in the wrong way, or the way that you think is the wrong way. So I want to cover a little bit of this. This clip is also going to go in my Journey series and in that other video. So in the beginning, and then I'm going to get into the voiceover. So this is Exhibit 1.
Okay, one more time, because it is pretty incredible. That's the tail that you're looking at, the one that looks like the head. I'm trying, but until she turns around, that looks like a snake, right? It's not. It's just a caterpillar, but it's made to look like a snake. And this one, more than any other, looks...
So it's an amazing mimicry.
The most like a snake I've ever seen. Guys didn't even believe me. Jesus, look at that head on it, but it's a tail. The head is actually up here. It's so cool, this thing. So good. Thank you for doing that, Leah. Jesus, look at that.
Just an amazing mimicry, right? Really cool.
Incredible.
So it's a caterpillar that has adapted to look like a snake to fend off predators, mostly, I'm sure, birds that are scared of snakes, right? And not only this, it's not only the way it looks, but it's also the movement, right? It's the way it's moving, and like the way that when it realized there was something near her, or near it, when the lady moved her hand, it moved like a snake would move.
Like 6 inches. So.
All right, so there's that. That's Exhibit 1. So Exhibit 2 here, this is the lamb psilis muscle, and it's learned to make itself look like a minnow And when a bass comes up to it and tries to eat it, it'll shoot these eggs up into the bass's gills. It's something I've talked about before. This is along the same lines. They're look at tiny little baby mussels here are clamping on to the gills and feeding off the blood of the bass, and then they fall off and they become big mussels, right? In the in the creek. I mean, just you get the idea here. They eventually will get big enough to where they can just drop off and live on their own. But what I talk about here is mimicry. So here's one of the examples of the minnow. Here's a more sophisticated one, a better one, right? Like that woman said, that was the most snake-like caterpillar she's seen. Like she's seen some before, and they look a little, some of them are better than others. But this, this is the only creature that does this. And of course we have with butterflies, we have an owl. This is this is a moth that looks like an owl. There's all these various butterflies that look like something else, right? We know about camouflage and chameleons and things like this. This adaptation. And then all the variations of chickens, like chickens all come from jungle fowl, all the variations of dogs, all these things of ways of expressing themselves. And so, the mussel is less sophisticated a creature than the caterpillar, and the caterpillar is less sophisticated than the moth, right? Caterpillars evolve into butterflies and moths. And so we'll come back to this. I want to show you this other clip now too. So this is exhibit C here. So this video popped up and I was doing something, was playing in the background, and something caught my attention because of everything I was going to say here anyway. And what I'm going to say later at the end of the next voiceover for you watching this on the Gratefullness Meditation and Journey series in the previous, and then at the end of this video for Positive Future, I'm going to put the voiceover about this. So this all ties together here.
That the American media played a kind of unseemly role in the sense that we went to NBC first, and we were going to do a rather big piece in advance of the premiere.
Look at this smug fuck. This guy's released a documentary that Netanyahu, I think it's about prisoners being tortured or something like that, like some kind of something, not Netanyahu didn't want to get out.
In Toronto, and then we were told at the last minute that, NBC has decided that we're not going to do the story because it would probably upset Netanyahu and that would limit our access to the prime minister.
They said that?
They said that?
Yes, they said that to me. That's correct.
Well,
not what I would regard as a deeply courageous move by a journalistic organization.
Really? You guys still talking about this like it's journalism?
Yeah, I mean, I think journalistic is probably too strong. But wow, I've worked at that company. I'm just surprised that they were as blunt as they were to you. What did you say?
I was just shocked. I mean, because I was ready to do an interview. I believe it was Andrea Mitchell. I was shocked.
You gave that look because she's, married to the guy who used to be in charge of the Federal Reserve, right? And they're both Jewish people, right?
And part of the reckoning was it was both craven and bad journalistically, but also sort of corrupt in the sense that they suggested that they might have gone with it if they themselves had discovered the police interrogation videos, but they weren't going to.
All right, so let me switch over to voiceover. I'm going to sum all this stuff up and get this video started here. Okay, so the voiceover I had, and I'm going through a little bit of why you keep going when you're fighting a losing battle. When, I talk about how we live in a time where people's lower nature always wins out. I mean, not always, but, for the majority of, when you're talking about groups of people, when you're talking about organizations, you're talking about countries, you're talking about the world, the the lower nature, there's often a battle between the higher nature and the lower nature. I'm going to show you some things about the protests in a bit, and some stuff with Trump and all these other things. But things are going in the wrong direction. We're going in a degraded direction, and like these two clowns talking about this like it's going to make a difference, and it's not. You're not going to change the system, and the system shouldn't be saved. I've talked about this so much. Like what God wants is something different, right? But within creatures, so I've often marveled about this with the Lampsilis mussel, and now this caterpillar and the moth that I showed you. What you have is creatures who are less sophisticated, less evolved. Like a caterpillar is less evolved than a snake. A snake is, has a more expansive evolution. A snake is more evolved than a caterpillar. And the caterpillar doesn't have the conceptual ability, nor does the Lampsilis mussel. Now, the Lampsilis mussel is just basically a water worm. These creatures, mussels and clams, like they don't have eyes. They don't have a sophisticated reasoning mechanism, right? They're pretty stable. I mean, they just live in a clam shell. They have a very limited, mussel shell. They have a limited, they produce, they help to cleanse the water. They have a function. But they're not nearly as sophisticated as a minnow. Like a minnow is many times more evolved than a mussel. And there's minnows that's just their life, small little fish. And then there's baby fish, whatever, that are, that grow up to be something else. But a bass is more sophisticated than a minnow. It has more of just in terms of their expression of their existence. You know what I'm talking about here. So how does a worm, something that's on the level of like slightly more sophisticated than a worm, that doesn't have eyes, doesn't know what a bass is, doesn't know what a minnow is, somehow able to mimic a minnow, right? Like, how does it do that? Like, how does it pass out? How does it conceive of this idea? Like, what would make it do that? That it would find a way to mimic a minnow to lure over a bass, which again can't see the bass, doesn't know what the bass eats, doesn't know what the bass, can't even conceive of a bass, right? The same thing with the caterpillar, can't conceive of a snake, but also can't conceive of the birds that are going to eat it, right? The birds are just flying down, grabbing it, off the tree or whatever, creatures that are going to eat the caterpillar, any number of creatures that would be scared of a snake. Like, how would it know that its predators, again, it has eyes, the caterpillar, but, it doesn't have the conceptual ability to understand that, okay, there are things eating me, and what are the things eating me? What are they scared of? Oh, snakes. Well, I'm going to make my tail into a snake. Like, how does it do that? Like, can you make your tail into a snake? Can you transform into a minnow? Like, we're much more sophisticated, right? Like that they would evolve into being able to do this. It would take, several species. I mean, it wouldn't just happen with one mussel or one caterpillar. They take some evolution to do this. And then you have the moth that makes itself look like an owl. Again, knowing what eats it and what's scared of eating it. And, the moth, I mean, you can't even see its back. It can't even look in the mirror and say, wow, doesn't even know what it looks like, right? Even if it looked in the mirror, it would just think it's another moth. They have no concept of what they look like. So how do they do that, right? How are they able to mimic things that are much more advanced than they are, much more sophisticated than they are, without the knowledge to do it? Like, how did they do this? Like, what made them do this, right? And then, Master Charge used to talk about how people can't find divinity within them. People can't find what they're really looking for, God's love. They complain their whole life of feeling lonely and scared and, purposeless. And the solution's right inside them and they can't find it. He said, but if you take a pot of honey and you put it on a string or rope and you hang it from the ceiling, ants will walk up the side of the ceiling, walk up the side of the wall, walk over the ceiling and down the rope and into the honey. Like, they can find the honey, but you can't find it in your own life, right? And so, there's within every human being, there's solutions and things that are beyond your capacity. I used to talk about also Native Americans would bury fish with their seeds. Like they would plant seeds and they would bury fish. Now, they didn't know about the nitrogen in fish, right? They didn't have scientific knowledge. But they saw the things growing near fish or whatever observation or, so like you have these things that people are able to do without having the scientific knowledge or the backing and, intuition. I mean, some of it's, some reasonings involved beyond, some mental capacity. But you have these solutions out there. We have solutions in us. We have solutions available to nature. The fascinating and marvel of the natural world. And on a spiritual level, even more so. It's much easier to change things on the spiritual level because it's not physical matter. Physical matter takes force and, physical skill and energy to transform, but internally you can change in a moment. Like it's much more easy. It's easier to change your spiritual self than it is to change your physical body. And people are able to transform their physical body all the time in various ways. I mean, I'm not talking about plastic surgery, but just in terms of, losing and gaining weight and all kinds of ways that you can maximize yourself physically, but it's limited, whereas your spiritual evolution is not. And so the problem that we have is everyone's trying to change manifest something in the world and change something physically and materially and using the system that's in place. A demonic system that is, taking everybody in the wrong direction and disempowering people and cutting them off from their true, evolutionary aspect, right? Everybody has a version of themselves, the best version of themselves, like when you've mastered yourself, like when someone's become a spiritual master, they've surrendered to their soul, they've maximized their full potential, right? Everybody has that in them. And, people get caught up with this idea of good and evil. But, we all have the same potential, but we don't have the same opportunity to manifest that potential in this life. Like everybody has a higher nature, the highest level that you can achieve in this life, right? And so when you think about people who are like lower or, less evolved or, they're caught up in, people get caught up in the idea of good and evil. But good and evil is about what's God's will and what is ego creation, like that goes against God's will, right? That's, and that's not really good and evil. It's something beyond that. But you have a lot of primitive people that, they're binary in their approach to thinking. So they have to think about, well, this thing's good and this thing's evil, but that's all they can do. And so it's limited. It's for the less evolved. But for everyone else, people who reach a certain level, it's not about good or evil. It's about what God's will is and what goes against God's will. And for you to really understand that, you have to connect to divinity on deeper and deeper levels to understand God's will. Because things that appear that are bad are God's will. Outcomes that God creates that nobody wants or people are against are still God's will. So you're evil because your ego wants something that God, clearly says should no longer exist. God's destroying something for a reason, the American system, and your ego wants it to continue, and so you're mad at God or you're thinking this is evil and why is evil winning here, God? But God's like, well, I'm done with the American system. You're the one who's embracing a position against my will, right? And so, being able to understand God's will and being able to maximize your potential. You can't look at all these people like Trump or the people you deal with that suck and compare yourselves to them, because spirituality doesn't grade on a curve. It grades on your potential. Like what can you do? Like that person might be maxing out their potential, they're just unevolved. Like all these people that you consider evil or whatever, and that whatever they're doing or not doing that is with God's will, they just can't be on the level that you're on. So you can't look at them and feel like superior or better because you're not maxing out your potential. Like they might be maxing out their potential. That's the best they could possibly do. But what can you do? Like what's your potential? What's your spiritual potential? Going back to this idea of these creatures that I showed you that can exceed their evolutionary development and display something that's superior to them and beyond anything that they could conceive of. I mean, a minnow has a much more sophisticated life than a mussel, and yet the mussel is able to mimic it without, without any, I mean, it's gone far beyond its, what it should be able to do as a creature, right? It's maxed out what it can possibly do. Only a person who can understand and, I mean, fully understand what God's will is could talk about good and evil, right? In the real terms, because whatever God's creation wants to do in terms of create, destroy, preserve, change. I mean, these are the things that, that you have to understand. Like, why is this happening? Beyond what I want, beyond what my expectations are. And I talk about this a lot at the end of the video, so I'm going to move to some of these other things. But, this video is sort of about this end game stuff and people realizing that the solution is there. The first Star Trek episode I saw, at least the one that I remember, was Captain Kirk was stuck on a planet with this creature called the Gorn, which was a reptilian creature. And the Gorn moved really slow, but it was way stronger than Kirk. And Kirk couldn't physically fight it. And they were placed there by some superior beings that said, they were fighting it out. They were having some kind of, their two starships were battling it out. And these superior beings put the two captains of the ship on, of their respective ships on the planet, and there was a fight to the death, and whoever died, the superior beings were going to destroy that ship of that captain, and the other one could go on its way. So they were basically making it so that they didn't do any other destruction with their lasers and fucking photon torpedoes or whatever, right? They were, minimizing the destruction to the universe and having these two primitive creatures fight it out. And Kirk realized that he couldn't beat the creature physically, but he remembered about gunpowder, and he figured a way to make a primitive gun. There were some diamonds, and there was some, charcoal, and he had something in his shoe, and all the things he needed to make a gun. He figured out how to make a gun, and he, I think the creature had made a knife out of some diamonds or something that he was going to kill Kirk with, and Kirk hit it with a primitive bullet and knocked the Gorn out, and he could have killed it, but he decided not to, and the higher developed creatures let both of them go on their way. But the reason I'm talking about this is because everything he needed was there. And people go through their life and, complain about problems, but all your solutions are there. There's no problem that you have in your life that there isn't a solution for, but the solution is oftentimes not the one that you want. And that's the problem. People don't want the solution that's there. They want they want something that goes along with their egotistical view of what life should be about. So I'm going to talk about this, about toiling, and about how, fighting for the losing side, and which is what people have done for the truth community. It's only because, your idea of victory, of your idea of success has to change, right? Instead of what people are hoping to create some kind of, change in the system or saving the system or any number of things, or, living forever or whatever it is, right? That people think about, what success is. And success, your parameters and your definition of success has to change, and then the solution comes to you. Anyways, let's get into it here. Okay, so this is a audio that's going to go in 3 videos today. It's going to go in the Journey series. It's for the playlist on Gratefulness Meditation about cleaning anger and negative qualities. And it's going to be a part of my regular video on Pockets of the Future today at the end. So I went through something personal with this spiritual gathering, and it's about fighting for a losing effort, right? It's about dealing with disappointing outcomes and fighting for a losing cause. I don't want to say fighting for a losing cause. It's more about, like, we'll put it in a positive terms, doing the work you're supposed to do regardless of the outcome, when the outcome is going to go in what's perceivably a negative way. So, I have this gathering going on, these sittings, and the sittings have been really blissful. unbelievably blissful. Just the best sittings that have been done in gratefulness meditation. And they're supposed to be about cleaning anger, but I felt like it's about so much more, right? I've talked about anger and hatred and disappointment and blaming and all these types of things, finger pointing, frustration, right? Just negative feelings like resentment, right? Anger can be used for something positive. Anger is a force and energy that can be used to motivate you to fight back, to and not external things, obviously, in the fight or flight type situation. But that's just the animalistic aspect. But like anger at yourself that gets you to change. Anger about things that need to change, that you have to change yourself to you have to become the change you want in the world. Those kind of bullshit sayings that people make, right? When we're talking about anger or resentment, we're talking about hatred and negative qualities. It occurred to me that it's about disappointing outcomes, and I'm not feeling a lot of anger myself because I've accepted the loss, right? The things are going to go in this direction. When I'm talking about disappointing outcomes, you have these anticipation things, right? Anticipation of something negative that isn't as bad as you think it is, oftentimes. In anticipation of something positive that doesn't live up to the anticipation, doesn't live up to the expectations, right? Master Charge used to say, expect not and thou shalt not be disappointed. And that we have these expectations, right? And sometimes, people put so much stake into something, like even their belief in God. Like if Trump wins, I'm not going to believe in God anymore. If Joe Biden wins, I'm not going to believe in God anymore. Like that kind of, if my loved one who's sick dies, I'm not going to believe in God anymore, or something, even more substantial. If this war starts, or, if I lose my job, or, these things, things that are just, there's things that happen to you in life that come with where you get just knocked out, like you get slapped, you go into a state of shock where it's just, you glitch out because of the outcome, right? And, you're expecting things to go one way, and they go another, or something comes out of the blue that you didn't expect and just sort of knocks you out, like slaps you, and you're rattled, you're shook, and your faith in God is tested. Your belief in whatever you're doing, and these are knockout blows, and these things happen to people. Sometimes they don't recover from them, right? They just sort of go into NPC mode. They're just never the same. It zaps them of their life force, and they put so much stake in something, and it goes in a direction that they didn't anticipate. And so what I'm talking about here, you have expectations of something. You have these things. Let's say it's like when you're a kid, it's Christmas morning, and you're expecting these various presents, and let's say you get all of them, and you feel like shit afterwards, and you're like, why do I feel like shit? Everything went the way I expected, but it didn't feel the way you did, right? You didn't. The expectation exceeded the actual event. This happens with Super Bowls and holidays and vacations and all kinds of things where you have these expectations, and even if things go, weddings, married, the day of the wedding day, things that people anticipate, and then there's some sort of hey, that didn't live up to expectations. Even the birth of a child, where you get there could be a depression that sets in, postpartum depression. There's all this anticipation for something. I've often talked about the Sahaj Marg gatherings and the Sahaj Marg method. It always exceeded expectations because the spiritual energy that was there was something that I couldn't, even if I remembered what it was like, I couldn't recreate the feeling that I got when I went to the gathering. Like I remembered what it was like, but the feeling wasn't something I could generate. And there was always a negative thing in the beginning, like cleaning, what they call the cleaning aspect, where I would get sick, or I would just feel like shit emotionally, just be less grumpy and just irritable and frustrated. But by the end of the gathering, it was always like bliss, and it always exceeded expectations. But most things in life are disappointing, and you think it's going to go a certain way, and you have these, like I said, anticipation of it, and then it goes in a way that's, negative, and that's what causes anger. really it's an anger at God. It's an anger at, the creation. Why is this unfair thing happening? Why is this world like this? The things that go with it, right? Then other conditions like hatred and blame and, resentment and these things set in. So that's what was being cleaned in this gathering that we're doing, this online set of sittings. And, it came to me that this is more about disappointment than anger, because it's the disappointment that causes it, right? In the Sahaj Marg tradition, the second master Babaji used to say, doubt poisons the will, right? And you get into situations like, for example, years ago, I was researching the UN. Like, everyone goes through these phases. I mean, you should go through these phases of learning about the different components of the controlled system. And one of them is the UN, right? You learn about the UN and what it really is about, and how negative it is. And at that time when I was looking into it, this is the time of the Libyan war, which really affected me, where, what's being done in Iran was being done in Libya in a, lesser way, but still it was quite evil. And I was, just aware of it. And I felt it. Like, I felt bad for the Iranian people. I felt, the lies and the manipulations and all the shit that went with it. Gaddafi was a good leader for his people. He was thriving. And based in the UN's Millennium Development Goals, he was one of the few leaders that was going to achieve those goals. And so he was a truther. He came to the UN, and then he went after, he talked about 9/11. He talked about the 64 wars that have happened since the UN has, whatever it was, the number of wars that the UN has allowed to happen. And the UN ordered that he be taken out for bullshit reasons, right? Which we all, know. And while I was going through that, I found out that Sahaj Marg, Master Charji was, this is 2011, 12, where his health was failing, and he was delegating more things to these, sort of moneyed people around him, these shitty charactered people that were, often businessmen. And the UN was a big thing. Being an NGO in India, there was an NGO for every 460 people. And they thought it was a badge of honor to be in the UN. And I confronted these guys, and I went through it with them. And I was very disappointed in the outcome. And I felt ostracized, and it made it look like I was the asshole. Like, that's how I was the person that was being, shitty when I was, trying to bring purity to a situation, right? And it dinged me up in terms of my relationship to the organization and things. But it was a blessing, when this guy Dodgy ended up shitting the bed and being a piece of shit, right? This guy Dodgy who took over and created this cult, like this dumb cult of stupidity for the Heartfulness organization. But, I was thinking yesterday personally, it came up, and then came up this morning in the meditation, in the sitting that I was doing. So I did the fifth sitting and as a preceptor, and then later last night I took the sitting. I received it, and the sitting was very blissful giving it. But last night I was, just thinking about how, in many ways, my life's a disappointment, and not that I feel disappointed because I've accepted these negative outcomes, but I'm basically a part of the losing side of a lot of different things. Like, I'm on the losing side, in terms of the way people keep score in material life, right? That there is, especially now, and I think this is particular to the Kali Yuga, but this is part of human experience. There's a higher and there's a lower, and when there's a vote by humanity, when there is an outcome based in a choice between the higher and lower, people are always going to take the lower. Not everybody, but the majority of people. So that's what's happening. So, in the truth community, there's a battle between the higher and the lower. And the lower has overwhelmed the higher, which is, very consistent with what happens, right? That there's a higher nature. There's people who are, smarter and more spiritually, well, I don't know, what do you want to say? People who are a different level of consciousness that saw what the truth community could be. And then there was all these grifting people looking to make a quick buck, people who are angry and negative, people who are double-digit IQ, people who just, thought this was a chance to verbalize their anger at creation and the world and whatever it is. And people who just, poor character, would make up bullshit you know, and then all the disinformation agents that are paid by the government, right? And so that just overwhelmed the possibility of what the truth community could be. But even if the truth community had embraced the higher, humanity was still going to embrace the lower. Even if the truth community stayed pure, it wouldn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. The outcome's going to be the same because the system's fucked. Like, you know, and when you get to the point where you realize that you can't fix the system, then what is the truth community for? And, you know, would be the solution about divinity within you. That would be, the only real truth that people have to become better. And the way to become better is to embrace your higher nature, find the soul within your soul's path, and become what everyone has a potential saint in them, a potential master. Everyone has the best version of themselves, becoming one with God, right? Merging with the source. And, there's different levels to it, right? You go, just going in a positive direction would be just one thing, right? So this leads me to my second and more severe disappointment. And I don't want to say it because I don't feel disappointed, but, it was not the better outcome, right? Like, this is, the fighting the losing battle. And so I was thinking about this last night, and when you start doing the meditation, when you start being on a spiritual path, there's some things that you have and what I used to have and what I don't have now, and what has been lost and what has been gained. And so one of the things is you want to talk about it. When I first did the Sahaj Marg system, after I took the 3 introductory sittings, I said to my preceptor, I got to tell everybody about this. We got to tell everyone about this. This is amazing. Like, I was so excited. I was pumped up. I'm like, everyone's got to do this. This is amazing. This is the best thing ever. And I felt that way for the first 2 years. You come into something as a new person, and I just really wanted to talk about it and tell people about it, but it was disappointing. I told people about it, and they all looked at me like I was fucking crazy. Didn't have an effect. And the way I went about telling them was just, it was, I had to learn that you just, it's genuine and sincere. And, I never had been excited about something. Like, everything had been, I didn't really have a purpose. Like, I just, everything had just sort of disappointed me. The things that I was into, the things, whether it's playing basketball or, whatever things that I enjoyed doing, or it wasn't my thing. Like, I would go to do holidays and this, and I look forward to things like everybody else, but it just wasn't right. I wasn't born for the American system, like any part of it. Like, it's not my thing. But I found my thing, and I thought, wow, this should be everybody's thing because of the effects it has. And when I talked about it, I was, it was just, I didn't do it in a good way, recognizing, how people were going to receive what I was saying, either the way that I presented the information or whatever it is, right? And so I've gotten better at that over time. But as you start doing the practice and you read the literature and you experience the benefits of the system, you want to talk about it, and you want to talk about it with other people. And we'll get into the peer thing in a moment. But you want to talk about it to people that don't know, because it's a great thing. It's like a gift you have to give to people. It's a wonderful thing that can, not solve all their problems, but, change their whole orientation of their existence into a positive one, which is better than solving people's problems. It's better than making people happy. It changed their whole negative orientation into a positive one. And since I was working in the counseling field, and I went back and got my master's in counseling, and I was dealing with, people's problems and the difficulties of human life as a profession, and there was a solution just sitting there waiting for you. It's so easy to do, but, how do you get people to do it, right? Because people don't want it. I didn't want it. Like, I tried meditating before and didn't like it. And so, it's just, I ended up just trying it, and I had, I don't want to call it miraculous, but it was miraculous in a way, but transformative. Like, my namesake, St. Paul, being knocked off a horse in Damascus, right? Falling off the horse and having blinded and these things, having divine vision opened up, right? So it was like that. Like, that's the kind of level of experience that I have, right? And so, being able to talk about it here has been great. Like, this the thing that's developed the most. Like this is, where this is something that, it's still fighting a losing effort, but I'm able to disseminate the information, right? So, this gathering that's going on, these amazing sittings, there's different ways to look at it. And I don't want to be defined by numbers. I woke up today and my heart was racing. And I checked my pulse and it was 90, which is, and then it started to go down, right? So, I've had this thing where my heartbeat went up to 250 beats a minute, or whatever it was, right? Like the fucking, the finger stick was, bah, bah, like alarm, like sending out, like, you better do something about this, bro. So I've talked about that the past couple of months, and the condition seems to have resolved itself. But I feel there's some times when my heart's racing a little bit, and I have to monitor it. And like I said, I don't want to just, now I'm also conscious of my weight, so I'm weighing myself every day, and I just don't like to be defined by numbers, right? Where you're looking at the numbers, where how much money you make or how much, this, that, whatever you have, like, like how many friends you have on the social media, these kind of things. How many views I get, like these types of things. But, I woke up and my heart was racing a bit. I could hear the wild turkeys going off, and I had to let the dogs out. And I went outside with them. It's a colder day. It's been up in the 70s and 80s, but today it's the high is going to be like 60, and I knew that's coming. But it's a crisp day. And I went outside, beautiful blue sky, but I could see in the distance some chemtrails going up, right, which is another kind of losing effort. And so, when I did the thing where I put my legs up in the air, my wife found this thing where I put my legs on the wall, and that really helps. And I did my pulse, it was already down to 60. My pulse rates, resting pulse rates in the 60s or 70s. And then, beats per minute or whatever it is. And it goes up to about 90, maybe 100 when I'm doing activity. But, within the range of 60 to, I would say, 90 and hundreds, I really can't feel the difference. Like, sometimes I'm out of breath. And I'll take my pulse and it's like 80, so, I mean, it's, and I've never checked it before. Like my wife had gotten these finger sticks, but when my heart went up to 250, now I had to fucking pay attention, which was a pain in the ass, right? And I could feel this condition where I feel a little bit sped up, a little bit wired. And, it used to happen all the time. I mean, I did cocaine at one point in my life, right? I am very sensitive to caffeine and even sugars, and I can get really amped up. Like I can get really, sped up. And when I'm doing some physical activity, I have to get up for it, some kind of, big physical work that I have to do. Your heart rate's playing sports and things. And, it's just within normal range. But now, because what happened was my heartbeat wouldn't go down. It just kept on going up, like the mechanism for, hey, go back down now, right? Your heart has to go up some certain amount of beats, and then the parasympathetic nervous system, which is control of okay, now we gotta go back down, right? That got messed up, and I now had to attend to that, right? But anyway, so I woke up like that. And so, going back to the point here. So these sittings that are, that I've been doing, the first sitting got 97 views. So, there's going to be 7 sittings over a period of 7 days. And I know people have time issues and whatever it is, right? But it got 97 views and 6 comments, which, after millions of people have come to my channel, and this is the best thing ever. Like, it's just, I can't even express it. Like, it's, I mean, I can't say how great it is. And, that's one way to look at it. But if I was a preceptor, a lone preceptor in a center, if you could get 12 people to show up every week for group meditation, that was great. Like, I mean, there's centers with multiple preceptors, and there's like 6 preceptors, and they have like 20 total people, right? So, back when Chargy was still alive, and even when he would come to America and the numbers would come up, you'd get 60 or 70 people at a group meditation, and then, they would just fall off. They would just disappear. And so 100 people is pretty good for, what I'm doing here, whatever it is. Like, again, I don't want to be defined by numbers. And then the next sitting got 69 people. And then the third sitting, 51. Day 4 was 38. And then I put out experience video. It got 36 views. And day 5, there's 33. So, and those numbers might go up as people catch up, some people doing it. But 40, 50 people doing it, that's not anything. And I'm glad for that. I'm grateful for that. But after, millions of people have heard me talk about this, fuck, right? I mean, like it's just, and this is the best thing I got going in terms of my spiritual practice. That, being able to talk about something I love and have people listen to it is, one of the things. It's like just one of the things that naturally comes that when you have something great, you want to share it. You want to tell people about something great. I get to do that, which it's a blessing, and I'm grateful for that. And so even though in itself it's a disappointment, that's the best thing I've got going right now. Now I'm going to talk about how to deal with these disappointments. That's where I'm getting to, and as we go through this. But the second thing is, having the spiritual master. You used to be able to write to Master Chargy, or go see him and talk to him, and you could express things, gratitude for what's going on, or you could have problems or issues, and things that you were struggling with. And in the beginning, I used to write to him, and like it would be taken, right? Like by the time he received the letter, it had already resolved itself. Like it was just something where it was a way to put it in front of God. Like people have their way, like religious people have their way. When you really have struggling with something, and then you just you feel like you want to get the information to God, and if you're doing it the right way, you're not looking for God to do one thing or another. You just want God to know, like, this is what I'm going through. God, please, can you help me? Whatever it is, and help shouldn't be do what I want you to do. Like if you're a real spiritual person, but help you go through it. This is beyond my capacity to bear. This pain is too great for me to bear. Can you help me? Can you help me somehow? Whatever that is, because sometimes it's already like you've lost a child. There's God can't, bring the child back to life because, technically God could, but that's not on the table. So can you help me? Can you help me, deal with this thing? Can you help me? It's too much for me. And, and there's different levels to that, but we used to be able to write to Master Chargy, and he'd respond, he'd always write back, almost always. But either way, he would read the letters. And as time grew on, I didn't need that as much because I found, putting it in front of God in a way where I didn't have to bother Master Chargy, who was struggling with health issues. Like if I wrote to him, it was very seldom. But, I got to see him and be around him, and he was someone on a higher level. And there are lots of people that were, more advanced in their spiritual journey than I was. And I got to talk to them or spend time with them or get a sitting from them. And then I had peers, people who I was friends with or I'd meet, and, we'd see each other at gatherings, but maybe we wouldn't correspond other than that. But we were, people that all read the literature and did the practice and thought this thing was amazing, and on a deep level, and enjoyed talking to people who are peers, like people who are slightly ahead of me or slightly, whatever it was, people who are, on my level and shared a passion of this thing, and being able to talk to people about that and have other people who you could see them benefiting from it and just having some sort of camaraderie, right? And that's all fucking gone, like all that stuff. I can write to Master Chargy and, on an etheric level, connect spiritually, but the human element's gone. Like the human element's not there. The people who were there that I could get a sitting from, or I could go to a precept or get a sitting, now there's the Gratefullness meditation, and that suffices. I think in some ways it's, more than enough for me. Like that's replaced the organization, but the human interactions, going to a gathering, just being a part of that, that's gone. Like in that, that's a huge blow. And just having an organization, the literature and having the books that were published, all these things that have disappeared because Dodgy's a piece of shit. There's these things you can get on eBay. And, again, I'm not reading all that much, so there isn't like the same thing. But, being around people, being in an organizational type situation of a shared movement, Like that's been erased by Dodgy, this piece of shit, right? And all the people that are with him. That's a huge blow, right? That's a big thing. And my capacity to connect to God directly has increased by this whole process. So that's great. Like, so there's a gain there, right? There's a lot of loss, but there's a gain. And, I don't need as much as I used to. So that's kind of great. But, having people I could talk about these things with and just, whatever it is, like people go to these like support groups, right? And when you have people that are, going through things, or you can help them, or you're going through something that can help you, different things, right? People can remind you. Again, doubt poisons the will, and you're having people around who can help you with that. So, you have being an island is difficult. Like being someone on your own is difficult with the whole thing, right? And I can't recreate the organization, and so there's that. And the ashrams have been contaminated by this piece of shit Dodgy. But in that, there's all these people that have either quit or they have, they know it sucks a little bit, some of them, and they know Dodgy's a piece of shit, or they don't, or they just think he's great or whatever. But he's one. Like there's no, there's this guy, the Dodgy truther I talk about. He's he's always trying to get information about Dodgy out there, but he's like, I think pretty much figured out that, people have all done what they've reconciled this whatever way they can. But this is what happens to every religion. This is what I'm talking about. The lower winning out. Like Dodgy's surrounded by a bunch of moneyed, power-hungry, fame-chasing pieces of shit. And, he himself's a piece of shit, and, his kids, and this whole fucking situation. And they've taken this thing and degraded it because of their embracing their lower nature, not their higher nature. And it's a real bummer. Like, this is what's happened to every religion. In every religion, there's 10% of the people are real seekers. And, they're trying to find a way to connect to God through the bullshit of the religion, right? Like they're trying to connect to Jesus directly or Krishna directly or whatever it is. They're trying to figure out a way. And they're, because they have good spiritual tendencies. It's just the method that's there has been lost. And it's been degraded by all the people. So there's that. Okay, so I'm starting to get tired out. I'm going to go eat breakfast and then take my dogs out for a little walk and come back and finish this up. Okay, so I ate breakfast, half hour in, first thing in the morning, doing a voiceover, the energy just dissipates. I've lost about 15 pounds since so I'm just eating less, so I'm like usually getting tired and hungry a lot. But anyways, I ate breakfast. I'm going to go for a walk with my dogs in a moment. But I wanted to talk about this first. I want to do a comprehensive recalling of all the things that I thought about, but I want to give the solution first, right? So, one of the things is to stay in routine, right? And I'm going to get into all the things that, that I'm doing, and just do the work. And again, the idea of you do the work and leave the results to God, right? That's the message that I was told over and over again, sometimes directly by Master Chargy, and then in his talks, and then just my personal dealing with things, that you do the work and you don't worry about the results. The results are God's. The work is yours. The results are God's. And it's one of the kind of more profound practical teachings of the Sahaj Marg system. And part of that is staying in routine, and also that you yourself need to go in the right direction. Despite the results, despite what other people react to it, you're not doing it for other people. You're not doing it for, you're working for God, and people benefit from it, and the planet hopefully benefits, and you're making the world a better place by doing the work. And the results might be far off, and they might be for you in the future. You're setting yourself up for your next life. You're setting yourself up for your next existence, whether it's here or somewhere else. That's why you do any of these things, right? That's why it's called blind faith. You're just going in the right direction. You need to go in the forward, and if people go with you, then that's great. If they don't, that shouldn't deter you. And maybe you're planting seeds for them in the future. That's part of the Sahaj Marg system. Anybody who starts the meditation, whether they take the first 3 sittings and quit, will come back to it. Whether it's in their next life or some life after it, once their soul gets a taste of transmission, they'll come back to it, and all these things. So you're planting seeds, and sticking in routine is like key. Like you have a routine, you have a system, especially as you get older. And you're losing things. You're losing your physical strength, your physical flexibility, your physical, body's breaking down, and you're doing these things. I don't. I've never really thought about legacy, right? And so this is a part of what I was talking about before. And you want to leave something behind for other people. You want something, your work to continue. People want. I mean, Trump is, which we'll get into in a bit. He's citing his name on the dollar bill now, like he's putting his name on currency. He's got another. He wants statues. He wants these things. Means nothing. Like it's just physical things. Like you want to leave something behind that carries forward, like something that other people can benefit from. And I was thinking about this. I've built 4 homesteads over whatever. There's some people I think living in one of them, the first one, and these different farms and things. And the one that I'm working on now, the retirement one, the one my wife and I will retire to. And, it's a possibility that could be like an ashram. There's days it reminds me so much of the Atlanta ashram and the spiritual energy there. I've had some great experiences with it. This is my last one. Like this is, I don't have any more in me it takes a lot of energy to figure out how to turn something that, things that weren't working farms into a working farm. And I've done it a number of times now. Again, this is my 4th one. And, this is the one that, I'll die at in whatever way that plays out. But this is my last thing. And, it could possibly be an ashram. But I look at the gratefulness meditation and, there's, like I said, it's just people who are there and people who are listening to that on the video or doing the meditation. It's great. I'm happy you're doing it. And, it's not for me that you're doing it, but, I'm glad there's people doing it. But, there's just doesn't seem to be a path forward. Right. And I was, there's that video I saw the other day of that guy who, he did the Brighter Minds. He did examine, he tested the kids using eye patches and he proved that Brighter Minds was a fraud. And he was thinking this was a cult and he was going through shit and he called me up, and he couldn't deal with some of the other stuff about Daji. Like he could admit that Daji had turned on his own spiritual master Charji. That shit that's, you can't come back from. But, the guy's now posting videos about what a great guru Daji is. He's been, went back to the dark side because people just embrace the lower and they can't deal with the truth. They're weak, these things. And so, there's just no way forward. Like with my kids choosing the lower, my kids had the option. They grew up in a, Sahaj Marg family as much as my ex was, crazy and difficult. She believed in the system and, we did our best to, to present it to them and have them be a part of it, and they've all rejected it. And, that sucked. Like that was really the big disappointment that all that energy I put into that. And, then that meant that the intergenerational family farm and there'd be no one to carry on the tradition. And, you build a farm, you hopefully that you'd give it to your kids, and that's not an option. And, and then an ashram even more so. So this was, there's no legacy for me, like in terms of the material world. And it's not something I think about or care about, but, I want this to continue. And, in terms of the preserving of the Sahaj Marg system the way it was, this YouTube will stay up as long as it does. And these gratefulness meditation sittings and things will be there for people to partake of. And I don't, I have no way of seeing how that's going to affect people. And I don't know how the people who are doing it's affecting them now and how that'll move forward, right? But there's, the big thing that the masters had was they wanted a quality disciple to continue on the work, right? And, they had 3. There's 2 of them. Babaji was a great disciple and he became a great master in Charji. And then things shit to bed with Daji, and when that happened, now there's no, roadmap for people. And so, in terms of all the work, like I just got to do it and, without thoughts of the results. But right now, when there's no results, there's just no path forward. Unless something happens and changes that, as you get older, you realize your time is limited and your energy to do the work is limited. And, you do what you can, but there's always, but finding somebody to turn the work over to is extremely difficult as the work is of a spiritual nature or something like that, right? In a world where everything's getting degraded. We're up against a losing proposition. Like the system's collapsing, the truth community, it's proven to be a failure in the sense of just stay truthful. Like that's what be honest and be truthful. I mean, when the majority of the people in the truth community embraced Trump because he said a few things and there was all this kind of stuff, right? RFK Jr. gave some great interviews, the one with Joe Rogan and then the ones following. And he was thoughtful and he understood truther positions. And he talked about this guy, Sisyphus. I think that's how you pronounce it. The guy who, he talked about just pushing the rock up the mountain just for, the guy who pushed up the rock up the mountain and every day it would roll back down. I talked about how my brother in Vietnam, there was a guy who was building a Buddhist shrine. And he'd build it during the night and the American soldiers would blow it up during the day because, they couldn't have something that would, threaten their position, right? Like just military strategy. But the guy was just a regular Buddhist. He wasn't a Viet Cong guy, and he had to build this shrine every day on a certain point. And if it got destroyed, you had to build it again, right? And that went on for I don't know how long. I don't know if the guy ended up getting killed. I don't know what the outcome was. I don't think my brother probably even remembers, but it was a thing, right? So, sometimes you're doing things that are toiling. And with my, first marriage, there's a lot of toiling. And, there was times that we had just, solutions and doors would open up. Like doors would be opened up and just as we were walking through it, or I was walking through it personally, it would slam in my face. And that was extremely frustrating, and so, this YouTube channel and this stuff is a doorway, that only would open up once I was free of the burden of, crazy self-sabotaging succubus, but I mean, that was part of the thing, but, and so that's a positive outcome. But, we live in a world that trends for, like I said, the lower. And that might not always be the case. And hopefully in the future, there'll be, some sort of a movement, like a revolutionary movement where people embrace their higher nature and spirituality will, save the world in a sense of, not this world that we live in, but the world that, post-apocalyptic, whatever it is. So yesterday, and those of you who listen to this on Positive Future, I've already covered this. I looked at this, I'm also going to cover these. There's this cool little caterpillar, and I'm going to put that in all my videos. All three of the videos, that'll be the beginning to this part here. Which you guys have already seen, this mussel that disguises itself as a minnow to lay its eggs in bass, and there's other things. I've already discussed that earlier. There's these No King protests, and, they're worthless. Like, there's just what? It's you've lost. Like, you there's no solution. The truth community's lost. There's no, it only in the sense that people aren't willing to accept the system needs to come down, and we need to build something better. And you do that by connecting to divinity within you, and you need to change, and you need to develop, right? It just, people have to leave their shitty religions behind, and their shitty dogmas, and their prejudices, and their, whatever the worldview that they have, and all this stuff. They have to leave it behind, because that's the only way to move forward with any of these things, right? And it's accepting that what people consider evil is going to win for a bit. Like, there's going to be a time of, things are going to go in the wrong direction in every level, in every capacity. I have had to accept this, but, it's something that will have to be overcome. Either this will be some post-apocalyptic demonic wasteland or complete depopulation, the human race will cease to exist, something like that, right? Some, self-destructive type situation. Or we're going to get it. We're going to evolve. We're going to move forward. Like, there's going to be one of the two things going to happen. It's a choice point. And right now it looks like people will choose the lower. But that might not be the case in 100 years or 50 years or even 20 years. And so, especially if the majority of the population is erased, the people that have no chance of choosing the right thing. And then you have the other people that are left. And so there's like always 10%. I saw this protest in Israel, where these people were protesting the war and they were getting beaten, and like, they've locked it down there, all that shit. And then there was some guy who covered Netanyahu this morning. Some video was recommended from Tucker Carlson. You've already seen the clip where this guy's talking about how NBC News was going to cover his documentary, but they didn't want to do it because of, and he was shocked at their reasoning and, all the stuff you've already heard. And I'm like, yeah, because like, you're not getting it. Like, you're not even there. It's pointless, right? Like, if you think that these things are going to change something, in terms of the outcome of the decisions that are being made about collapsing the SIP system and going in a demonic direction, that ain't happening, right? Like, that's simply just not happening. But, there is a positive outcome after that, right? Like, you got to keep the fire going. You got to keep the light, the light there. In the darkness, some people have to keep the light, in their hearts to whatever extent. And so that the light can be seen when the darkness clears, right? When the smoke clears. And so that's what we're doing here. Like, it's to, some future existence. Like, this is a long game, right? This is in a sense the end game beyond the end game, right? This is the post end game, the epilogue, it's the new beginning, right? The end game, and then there's the new beginning. And so this is going to end, and it's going to end badly, like all things, like, marriages ending badly, and all the things that end badly, civilizations collapsing. This is that, ending badly, choking it on its own depravity. But after that, there's something that can be, that can be moved forward. And that's, beyond all this. And you have to, have, this is where they talk about blind faith, because, we won't see it in our lifetimes, most of us, but it'll be there in the future. All right, so I'm kind of getting tired now. Let me wrap this one up here. Okay, so I just ate lunch. I had some more thoughts that I thought some things that I wanted to put in the voiceover, I forgot to. Sometimes when a team is behind, where it would be very unlikely that they could come back, it's the fourth quarter of a game, the end of a game, there's a possibility they could come back, but the coach has to evaluate whether it's worthwhile to chase it, to put the energy into what could most likely be a losing effort, right? And, if they expend too much energy coming back and then they're flat for the next game, a playoff series, you have to think about it that way, right? You have to make the appropriate decision when it's time to call it, right? There are times in life where the outcome's already determined. Now in chess, you can just tip your king, right? You can tip your king and just say the game's over. Put your king on the side, because you don't have to go through the rest of the game. The game's over. The other person's going to win. They're going to win. There's no reason to, to put yourself through all that and the other person through all that. Years ago, I was at this party when I worked at my first treatment center. There was a girl there. She had a bunch of nerdy friends that were all fans of the show Doctor Who. She put out an ad somewhere and found all these people that were into Doctor Who, and they started a friend base there. She had about 15 or so friends. And one of the guys was like particularly weird. And he and another guy were playing croquet. So there's this woman we work with and her Doctor Who friends, and then all of us that work together, there's 5 of us. And then we were just watching them play. And one of the guys just refused to lose. The other guy had the guy beat. Whatever happens at the end where one ball is poison. And so the other guy, and she had a large backyard, right? Our coworker, I think it was her dad's house, parents' house. And this guy was just hitting, it was like a couple acres. And he was just blasting the ball from one side. And then the guy would blast his ball to catch up to him. And then he'd blast the ball back, refusing to lose, right? Refusing to play by the, he was beaten, but another guy just said, fuck it, I'm going to quit. This sucks. And the guy's jumping up and down. I won. We were all laughing at the guy, right? We couldn't believe that he was doing it, but it was just, he was a weird dude, right? But getting back to it, there's a point you realize that what you're doing is like, it's just a failed exercise. And then you have to redefine success, and one of the stories Master Charger used to always tell was the grandfather was out with his grandson and he was planting fruit trees. And, he only had a few years left to live. And his grandson said, why are you playing these? You won't be alive to eat the fruit. He said, yeah, but you will, and your children will, right? So, and sometimes you're just planting the seeds, or you're just, doing the work because it has to be done, playing your part. And, victory or defeat are defined by some spiritual reality that's beyond the material world of cause and effect, right? You're doing it because you have to do it, right? You're doing it because you're supposed to do it. There's a movie in it with Christopher Walken, and his son was Brendan Fraser, and his son grew up like in a bunker, and he was going out to the world, and he was Christopher Walken was trying to explain baseball to him, and he's trying to explain why the guy at first had to run run to second when the batter hit the ball. He was like, "You must, because he must run. He runs because he must, right?" And like that's you do things because you're supposed to do them, right? And that's without any thought of results or any of these things. And you can redefine what success is, right? And so, divine success or spiritual success is different than material success. Anyways, let me wrap this one up here. Okay, so this is the last voiceover in the playlist for the 7 meditative sittings to help clean out anger and frustration and all these things. And I've talked about various aspects of this in the previous voiceovers. I got a migraine headache yesterday, which was kind of weird because since I've had the heart thing, which is I think about 6 weeks when I first had that, whatever it was, which is also sort of dissipated. And even a little bit before that, I had a migraine maybe in 2 or 3 months, like just a long time. And I don't know, I think it might have been a little bit because of dehydration. I felt a little bit off. The migraine is affected by the circulatory system in the gut, and also the nervous system. It's an inflamed nerve, I believe, in the base of my skull when I have the pain. So it's like these things. And lack of serotonin, I felt just a little bit drained and kind of tired yesterday. I think I woke up too early and I just didn't anyways. But I got this migraine, and I thought it was kind of associated with the whole cleaning and everything. And it was a tougher day for me to get through. The headache got worse and worse as the day wore on. But it's like my body just glitches out now. Like I've had migraines since I was in high school, but the stuff with the heart isn't like a heart thing. It's a nervous system thing, which regulates the heartbeat. And once in a while, my body just glitches out. Like it sucks, but it's just the way it is. I manage it. Like I haven't gotten cancer, and I don't have a heart condition. I don't have major issues. In terms of internal organs, I haven't had some kind of so everyone's got to deal with something, and that's what I have to deal with. But I went through these sittings and I didn't feel much anger. It was all very blissful, and I did all the meditations. I did the one last night, but I had the headache. It was really bad at that point. And I just I could barely meditate. So I decided to do this sitting again. I woke up early. I went to bed really early for me, and then I woke up at 4, and I often meditation and things that'll end up eventually making the headache better. I had some dry heaving, getting nauseous and things, which is all whatever. He goes, the lack of serotonin is a part of it. But anyways, I I felt some anger and some just frustration and almost like a sense of like pointlessness, right? Just given what's happening in the world and given what's happening with people, just in general, like it's always going to be the lowest. Like I cover this stuff every day, and I'm able to sort of detach myself from it. But the reality is things are not going well for human beings, and like whatever changes might come after a big slap in the face and whatever interventions, the need for spiritual evolution is there, but the desire is not. The want to isn't. Like the solution's there, but people don't want it. And and I struggle with it myself. It's not like I'm everyone could do better. But, most people just aren't interested at all in, becoming a better version of themselves. Most people are satisfied. Their egos have taken over, hijacked their existence. And so one of my viewers sent me this, and I'll kind of explain it because I'll put this up on my normal channel. The reason that I have gratefulness meditation is because the guy who was supposed to succeed the third master, it turned out just to be a total piece of shit. And I had a high opinion of him. He was a good preceptor, a good abhyasi, donated a lot of money. He did a lot of work. I had, nothing but, mostly a positive assessment of him. So when he was made the master, I had some good interactions with him when he was going to be the future master. But then I had some not so good interactions. And I started to think this guy's kind of an idiot and not right. And Master Chargy was like such an amazing person. When you've reached a level of self-mastery, it's going to manifest itself different with different people. When you reach your highest level, your full capacity. And, Chargy was a gifted person in the material world and, spiritually in ways that, just bigger than life. Like just he was going to be someone who was, my brother was saying no one could really follow him. The next person's going to be screwed. And, when you reach that level, like anything else, all of us who have done any kind of spiritual, have had some sort of spiritual evolution. When you go up to like a new level, you're going to fumble around. Like it's, when you're raised up to a higher level, it's not like you understand all the things. There has to be a mastery of that level, right? Like it's like when you start being a parent, right? You're not going to be a great parent right off the, you have all these learning, moments and tests and things, and you start a new job. I mean, anything, like you have to learn, you have to step into that role. And so, no, even if the person was great, Master Chargy was at his highest point when he died. And so people are going to compare that to the new person, which is always a difficult thing. Because the new person is just, learning, oftentimes overwhelmed by the position, and they have to kind of, work their way into it. And so, I mean, for a while I thought Daji would get better, this guy Kamesh Patel, but he just got worse and worse and stupider. And I saw a video of him, like he's done so many dumb things. And the problem is that all the people have either quit and given up on the system, or they're doing something in the system, like something that, they're still trying to connect to Chargy instead of, like they know Daji's a piece of shit, but they want to quit. Or that they've embraced him, and that's the majority of people. I would say, I don't know if that's the case. Probably half the people left. I don't know. Like, I don't have contact with the people, so I have no idea. But he's, done so many things that the other masters said shouldn't be done. Like, he's just, things that are corrupt, things are political, things that are scams. Like everything. His kids he and his family have pharmacies, and his family tried to do a home delivery pharmacy in America. They had 7 pharmacies in New York, and they partnered with other, pharmacies, people with pharmacies, to build a business. And during COVID, it seemed like it was going great, and they exaggerated the numbers, and they got $170 million in investor money, and they just absconded with it. Like, there's a whole SEC fucking filing against his son, and he's a part of that, and his son's living with him, and he's done a lot of thieving. And so the biggest thing the biggest crime is that, if you have a guru, a spiritual master, somebody is your teacher, and your teacher elevates you in ways, that you really can't understand unless you've experienced that kind of relationship. The guru-disciple relationship. But what the guru does for you, if it's a quality guru, if it's a scammer or some piece of shit, then yeah, it sucks. But if it's a real guru, like there's just this, all you can feel is gratitude. I mean, you can feel whatever you want, but the reality is you should be nothing but grateful. And Daji is not grateful for Chargy. He's done all kinds of things to undermine him. He got rid of all the guy's books. The guy had produced more literature and books and tapes and things like this. He was just really gifted speaker. And he was really good at disseminating information in a practical way. And he was well aware of like different cultures. He was well traveled. He could talk to Americans and Europeans and people from every country and just sort of understand them. He had a real gift. And Daji's just wiped out all that material. Like one guy told me that two of the people who are head of ashrams where they had all these books and literature, that Daji went in and said, destroy all the literature, right? That all the books. Like there was a big flood in Chennai where a lot of Charji's stuff was, and I videoed how these books were put up. The flood went up to the higher levels, but I think he had moved some of his books down to lower levels during the flood so that they would get ruined. I'm not sure. Like I've heard these various things. Like I don't have any proof of that, but that is very consistent with what he's done. But there was these two ashrams where they had all these books, and he said, you're going to destroy the books. And they didn't want to. He said, well, I'll just find someone else who will. So it's either you or somebody else, and you'll get fired from this voluntary position. And he was hell bent on undermining Charji and saying all these things about him, which he did over and over again, and trying to cancel Charji's birthday celebration, which he obviously did. So he did all these things, right, that were just the only legitimacy he had was Charji, vouched for him, that he was picked as the next master, and Charji was the one that so, and he fell at Charji's feet and got his knees, all this fucking fake bullshit, right? But as soon as Charji died, he clearly has a problem with them, and people won't admit it, but it's so fucking obvious, right? Sahaj Marg doesn't get into sin and guilt and shame because those things block your spiritual condition, but if there's one sin, it's ingratitude. That's why we say be grateful. God, God has a plan for you, and being grateful for God's plan is really important. Whatever your religion, whatever your, that's just, gratitude is the highest condition, right? When you're grateful for everything, good, bad, and the ugly. So Daji's lost people, and he can't gain people because he sucks. There was a video that popped up of him. I was on my Gratefullness meditation channel, which, so it recommended me a video of Daji, and I tend not to click on them because it irritates me. But he's with his granddaughter. He brings his grandkids out all the time. He wasn't a kid person. Like he's, but he brings his grandkids out. Like his granddaughter's sitting on his lap, and she looks fucking weird, and he's just like lost his shit. Like he's getting stupider. I think he's dying. I think he had cancer. Some people say he had cancer or something, and he's just turning like he's just really stupid, and he can't really articulate his points. And I watched a little bit of video. I'm like, wow, he's not going to be around much longer, and I wonder what's going to happen when all these fucking parasites vie for this position. There's like $1 billion of assets, and he's got all these, predators around him who want a piece of it, right? So it's pretty fucked. But one of my viewers who does the meditation sent me an email about the second master of the system, Babaji's upcoming birthday celebration on April 30th. Babaji was born on April 30th. And he, what Daji did was he said that these celebrations were too hard. And, it was said over and over again in these Whispers of the Brighter World messages and just in general, that these Bandara days, these 4 master birthdays were really important. Daji's, of course, sucks because he sucks. His is in September. But there were 4, and each one of these was in a different season. The first one's in February, the second one's in April, the third one's in July, and Daji's was in September. So there were supposed to be these 4 boosts, where you'd get a big jolt of spiritual energy because these gatherings were, the meditations were incredible. And I, would either do them at home if I couldn't travel, or I'd go to the ashram in America, or I'd go to, the ones I was there was in India. And they were incredible. They just, you'd go to this like other plane of existence in the meditations. They were amazing. And they were supposed to be kept sacred. But he said that he received a message from Babaji. We used to get these messages from this French woman, and he pretended that he was getting a message. And Babaji said, he kept on saying, what are we going to do about these four holidays, because they're really too difficult? And he said, well, we'll do them in 2. We'll celebrate the first 2 masters on Lalaji's birthday, the first master. And then we'll celebrate the next 2 which would be Charji and Bob and Kamlesh and Daji, will celebrate on Daji because those are the best days. Daji's birthday and Lalaji. And Daji kept calling him a founder because he created this parasitic organization called Heartfulness, which was his first move into like separating. Sahaj Marg, the Sri Ramchandra mission, has all these rules and bylaws to make sure the master doesn't glom onto the properties. I mean, any number of things that these were public properties. These were, properties of the collective. They were owned by the organization, and they were, registered in every country. There was ashrams, and there's a board of people, and they were supposed to be just these things are, not personal. And Daji is trying to glom all these by taking them out of the one organization and putting into this thing that he called Heartfulness, like his own bullshit thing, and that he was a founder of that, which is just he created a holding company. Like there's no fucking. But anyways, he tried to get rid of these bandaras, these gatherings, and people showed up at Charji's anyway because the majority of people are Charji people. There's very few people who were alive when Babaji was alive, and nobody wouldn't Lalaji, and the people know Charji, and he was their beloved master, and he was so much better than Daji, and Daji hates that shit, right? But anyways, Charji was kind of like, the best one in terms of material life and managing people and managing the organization. But Babaji was like the phenom spiritually. Like he broke all kinds of barriers spiritually, and he was like the main guy in the spiritual evolution, and that's the most important thing. And his position now in the universe, like in terms of what he's in charge of after, was Patanjali in a past life and these things. Charji was St. Paul in a past life, and he was a disciple of Patanjali Babaji in a previous life. So there's the connection there. I don't know what the fuck Daji was, but he's like, failure. Like he's, obviously had some predisposed issues towards just shitting the bed. But anyways, this email came out yesterday or something. And it's the 127th birth anniversary of Puja Sri Babaji Maharaj, the 117th birth anniversary of Puja Sri Tuktaji Maharaj. And I'll get to that in a moment because that's really funny. And then it's the commemoration of the 350th anniversary of Shidai Dida Diwas of Sheikh Guru Teg Benhar. So I'm going to explain all that because that's pretty fucked. Like to people, you guys don't, for most of you guys don't know how fucked it is because you don't know anything about this. But it's like instead of celebrating just Jesus's birth on Christmas, of course Christmas is now a Santa Claus holiday. And, that's been co-opted, so it's similar to that. But imagine celebrating Moses' birthday or, any of the number of these, David's birthday, right? King David's birthday. Like celebrating multiple birthdays on Jesus' birthday. Or ones that aren't even, like, it's not King David's birthday, but we're going to celebrate his life anyway. We're going to bring in other people because Jesus doesn't deserve his own fucking birthday celebration, right? I had two kids that were born on consecutive Mother's Days. One was born on the 9th of May, and the other was born on the 10th of May. And their first birthday, we celebrated together. But then I was like, that's shitty. So we, and they were young. They were like, 3 or 4, when they were just barely able to understand birthdays, right, when they were young. But then, celebrating them on separate days, right? People who have birthdays on Christmas, it's a whole fucking thing, or, whatever. Where it's, my ex was born on Halloween, which is very, telling. But it was a whole fucking day of hell for me because I kind of organized the birthdays and the holidays. And we were, trying to do different things so the kids didn't go trick-or-treating for shitty candy that we didn't want them to eat. We let them do it a couple times, but it was just, it's like you're giving them a big bag of fucking, getting sick, right? Like it's just, and most of it's just chemicals now and fucking sugar and all that shit. So, but it was just sucks, right? And so what Daji has done here, so this guy Tuktaji, they built this giant ashram, and people in India are very caste centered and very state centered. Like they all have their own language, and so I think there's like 90 different languages in India, like something crazy. There's a language that I met this family, and they came from a village that spoke this one language. You know, it was a language from the Mahabharata time. And there's 90,000 people who speak the language, right? Just a small, area. And, we're talking about a billion plus people. Like it's like 1,000,000,003, 1,000,004 people in India, right? Very, a lot of people there. And there's a place, and, I can't remember the name of the place from, wherever it is. But the women all wear these, the sari is this, a very, I think it's a difficult thing to wear. You wrap in a cloth around you multiple times. It's a whole thing. But these women wore these really neat colored saris. Like I like colors of orange and yellow and red. Like these are, and these were like an off orange color. And they had a gathering for that area, that place in India, and they all came down from there. And all the women were wearing these saris, and you'd look around, and the whole ashram was filled with this color, right? And they all have their own, dietary. They have their own recipes and diets, and they stick together. And so you'll see like Indians that stick together in America, but they'll usually be from the same state or the same sort of caste, the same kind of whatever it is, right? And Daji comes from a caste. He's a Patel, and they say, Hotel, Meltel, Patel, and they're known for business. And people were writing to me about his caste when I started criticizing him, and all these people that hate on him were interacting with me, like all these Indian people, and they were talking about his caste and how they're known for being like really immoral and unethical, and like the way that you would consider certain ethnic groups that are money oriented, right? Money people, and they are just not to be trusted, right? They're stab you in the back, and they'll always choose money over. And there's a talk that Charji gives that somebody when he was at Daji's hometown, where he's just criticizing these people being so focused on money, right? And Charji was a wealthy man, a successful man. He became a CEO of his company, right? He was, all these masters have jobs, and he wasn't against money, but these people were so fucking centered on money, it was hurting their spiritual evolution. He just blasts them. I mean, he's letting into them. And so, Charji was Brahmin, which is the sort of educated, they're oftentimes educators or some gurus, spiritual people, and government people, people work in the government there. A lot of them are, they're from South India. And so he built his ashram in South India, the headquarters in Chennai. And he had 20,000 people just in that one city or more, because the Brahmins will become spiritual. It's part of their culture. It's part of their whole thing. But Daji's people are money people. So he didn't have a group of people. They just have a small group of people. So Daji didn't have any of his own people. And it sucks that it's like that, but that's the way it is. And so he didn't have like a group of people a lot of people didn't like him and didn't trust him because of his caste and the state he came from. He comes from sort of the northern, the northwest part of the country where, near Bombay. He was Gujarati, the Gujarati state. And they didn't have a big ashram. So he was trying to, he doesn't have a fan base, like a bunch of people, like they accepted him as the master because Charji said so. But nobody really liked him. And, he didn't pop. He didn't have any, he didn't have a, he's hard to listen to. He's just not a good speaker. He just doesn't have a lot of charisma. I mean, aside from, he was raised to a higher level spiritually, but it didn't give him the gifts he needed to be a good person. So he started, I think he's really insecure. And they moved the headquarters from Chennai, the ashram in Chennai, that was 20,000 acres. And these big gatherings would get 20, 30, 40,000, sometimes 80,000 at one gathering, where Charji's 80th birthday or something. His 75th or 80th birthday, they got 80,000 people, right? And they would rent these 100 acres of land, and they'd put up tents, and they'd get the thing together. It was amazing what they could do. But the ashram itself could only seat 5,000 people, and they had already outgrown that. On Sundays, it would get up over 5,000 people. So they needed a bigger ashram. So they bought these 1,000 acres in the Hyderabad area, and they were developing this ashram there. But there wasn't a good group of people there. They had been, Babaji had sort of chastised these people for some bullshit they had pulled. And I don't know what caste is there. It's Telugu. Like when you go there, they have this language Telugu, and it's a lot of circles. Like when you look at you're on a road driving, you don't drive, but you're in a cab or whatever, a rickshaw, and you look at the signs, and there's just all these zeros. Like how the fuck, it's like this weird language. But there are people from Telugu, and they have this ashram that now the meditation hall is the biggest one in the world. It sits like 120,000 people. But on a regular Sunday, Daji was getting less than 1,000 people. And the ashram is far away from the city. So there's people who want to drive all the way out there from Hyderabad. And, like I said, there's 20,000 in the city of Chennai, but in Hyderabad there's maybe 5,000 who aren't really devoted people, who aren't really into it. And Daji isn't Telangana. He's not from Telugu, so he's not a local. And so he was trying to fill the ashram. And people were quitting, and, people were realizing he's a piece of shit. And, and I guess he was panicking, and he, went through his own bullshit. Like people who aren't suited for something and they're overwhelmed and they're shitty at their job. So there was an ashram, a place in about, 2 or 3 hours away that was this guy Tuktaji. So Tuktaji was some kind of Indian saint, but he was more like a social reformer. There are these people, and Jesus, I talk about this, and the Christians, don't like it, but it's true. And, Mahatma Gandhi was somebody like this. People who are, some way spiritual, but they're also social reformers, right? They're into politics. They're into, they're trying to stick up for the little people. They're two different things. There's like strictly spiritual, where you're just focused on spirituality. You don't give a shit what's going on politically, and that's what Sahaj Marg's supposed to be, just 100% spiritual. But there are, saints that come in that also do works for people on the material level, which is, perfectly fine. But it's not the same thing. And so Tuktaji was a guy who was sticking up for the small farmers in this region, in this Telugu state. And he had died in like 1960 or 70. So it wasn't so long ago. And they were waiting for another guru, like, how, they're waiting for the Messiah in Judaism. And preceptors started to go up there and start giving sittings. So Daji was invited to the ashram. And they had like these birthday celebrations and things there, or they had celebrations, a couple times a year at this ashram. And Daji was giving a big sitting to these people, right? Most of them were simple farmers and, whatever they are. And so Daji gives a sitting, and then he says to the people afterwards, Tuktaji merged in me. Which is just another one of his bullshit things. Like, in the Sahaj Marg tradition, the previous master merges with his disciple. And that keeps the energy going. So, like, ideally in Christianity, what they would have wanted is Jesus to merge with St. Peter, right? Because he was his chief disciple. And then all the popes after that, the previous master would merge in with the pope, like their souls become one. The essence of the soul exists in the disciple. And that's a beautiful thing if you can carry that on. In Sahaj Marg, it happened 3 times. Jalalaji merged into Babaji, and Babaji merged into Charaji. And it keeps the current master humble, because when people come up and say, hey, master, when they call him master, he's not thinking he's the master. He's thinking that there's, the soul that is the previous master is in him, is the master, right? Like, so it's, it sort of keeps the person from getting a big head, and, and it's like a real thing. Like he feels the essence of the, previous master. And so, Daji saying that Tuktaji merged in him was just some bullshit thing. And he said that there was these line of gurus that are all a part of Sahaj Marg, and he wrote a list of them, and he left Charaji's name off of it, which was completely fucked. And there's a video of this, and I dissected the video, and I shit all over called bullshit on all his bullshit claims, because this didn't happen. I was sent the documents where he said all this, like he wrote it down on a fucking piece of paper. And what he wanted to do was get these 250,000 people to convert to heartfulness. And he thought he could bullshit his way into doing it by saying this guy merged in them. But none of the people bought it. They didn't even know what fuck he was talking about. And they didn't do it, right? And, there was this big thing put out. My brother was telling me about it before I knew all the details. And then I found out about it. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's a tough fucking parasite, right? But my brother said, oh yeah, he just got all these people to start. Like 250, he's bringing in 250 new people. 250,000 new people. And I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. And then when I found out about it, and the people didn't do it. But the hilarious part about it is the guy's birthday is the same day as Babaji. And I'm like, how are you going to celebrate this guy's birthday on Babaji's birthday? You can't fucking do it. Like Babaji is, is considered the special personality. Like he's had, the greatest spiritual life of any person. That's how it's felt about in the system. I believe that, like based on his, spiritual discoveries in the system, that we all benefit on a practical level. The transmission and the cleaning, he's perfected it in different things. It's it's something that always existed, or has existed for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years. But, he perfected it, right? There's things that within the system of, Babaji being like the greatest spiritual person ever on earth, like this kind of thing. So you just can't have some guy who's a social reformer and has nothing to do with this. He has zero to do with any of it. And so now he's trying to stick his birthday back in there. He's trying to, bring these people back in, but they're not fucking coming in. So the other thing was this Sikh guy, and I don't know too much about this, but he's gone after a few of these other groups. And one of them is these Sikhs. The Sikhs wear turbans. They're some of them are like big guys. There's a great movie called Lagan, like the Bollywood movies. I can't get through them. But the movie Lagan is just an epic movie. It's about cricket, which I don't like, but the movie's just great. And even the songs are good. Like it's just usually they bust into these fucking songs. The other one's called The Lunchbox. I think it's called The Lunchbox. That's a fucking masterpiece. Amazing movie. But other than that, I really can't get in with these Indian movies. Just for a little bit, like, in a, kind of a goof. But, and I appreciate the culture. So it's like kind of interesting, but it's kind of humorous. But there was a Sikh character in this thing, Lagan. The guy's a giant, right? These guys were warriors. They were up in the northern part. The northern part of India had a lot of warriors because they're always getting invaded by the Mongols and the Aryans and these other groups, right? So, eventually the British, but they had a lot of warriors. They ate meat, this vegetarian country, but these guys ate meat. And these Sikhs were big guys, right? And there's a, Sikh community in Massachusetts and I think New Mexico, two places I lived. And my former roommate used to go and hang out with these Sikhs. And I met a couple of, these are white people. These are white people wearing turbans, right, who converted to this religion. And this guy was like 6'4", he's a big guy. And I met him and his wife, and then my roommate, this is just when I started Sahaj Marg, and my roommate, I was like, my late 20s, early 30s. And my roommate said they were getting a divorce or something because he went to a gathering, and he banged some little Sikh girl. Whatever. But I mean, that's, I don't know that much about the thing, but it's totally different than Sahaj Marg, and it's a religion, right? It's not, these things are religions. These aren't, part of the Sahaj Marg tradition. And so, Daji's so fucking desperate. I mean, he's Trump-like in his desperation. And the Sikh guru, Tag Baharji, is this other guy. So this is what it says. With deep joy and reverence, we invite you to celebrate Puja Babaji's Maharaj's 127th birth anniversary, a sacred occasion that inspires hearts across the world. Okay, so that's something that would be typically said, right? That's just, whatever. This year, the celebration have additional significance as we commemorate the 350th anniversary of the Sri Diwas martyrdom of Guru Teg Bahadur, honoring his supreme sacrifice and timeless message of courage and faith. So, the Sahaj Marg system is not prejudicial against all the other spiritual masters and all the other, religious figures and saints in every religion and people around the world. It acknowledges that there are people who are spiritual and have tendencies towards spirituality, and that everyone has that potential. Everyone has a potential saint and master inside of them, and it's there to pull that out. But it's not supposed to be a part of that religion. And Chargy, on his deathbed, put out a message that had disappeared. There's a few people that had it, that would have access to it, and I asked them for it, and they said they don't have it. Right? They played it at the ashram, and what he said was that Sahaj Marg was not an extension of Hinduism. It wasn't supposed to be an extension of the Hindu religion. That it stands on its own. It's a new thing. Now it's not acknowledging, and that's one of the great things about the Indian people and the Hindu religion. They acknowledge Jesus and various saints. They don't shit on these other religions. They acknowledge spiritual people, whoever they are. But it's not a part of it, right? And this is Babaji's birthday, and it's about Babaji more than anything else, about the transmission and cleaning and him perfecting this system, this amazing system. Daji has this weird thing with Buddha. He has Buddha statues. He just is into Buddha. He put it on his office. He put a thing of Buddha. And, Babaji intercommuned with Jesus, like he was intercommuned with all these saints, Muhammad and Buddha. And Muhammad and Buddha were the ones that the intercommuning, Buddha was sort of a dick, right? Just if you read the exchange. And Muhammad was maybe sort of a lesser, like he was a prophet and not really a saint, whatever he was. But anyways, these other traditions, they're not, Sahaj Marg, doesn't shit on those traditions, because some of those higher developed souls, like Jesus, does work for Sahaj Marg. He's in charge of one of the spiritual points. Like he's, part of the what they call the divine hierarchy. Like these various souls are doing work for Sahaj Marg, because their goal is to uplift humanity. But, their religions have been co-opted. There's an exchange between Jesus and Babaji. Babaji didn't know that much about Christianity. He grew up in rural India, and there probably wasn't any Christians at all there where he was. And he didn't understand, he didn't read the Bible or any of these things. But he intercommuned with Jesus, he knew of, And Jesus said that he was upset by the direction that Christianity went. And he put Babaji in charge of whatever the spiritual aspect of the system was. Babaji asked him, because he started getting Christians coming to him. And so he intercommuned with Jesus, saying it was okay for him to teach these guys. Right? So there was this thing that happened, right? So, this exchange. And Jesus said, yes, and I want you to take control over it, right? Because, I believe in your system or method or whatever. His soul, his disembodied soul said that. But in all that, right, these saints and souls are part of it, but their religions and the way that they're viewed now, and all these things are so filled with deception and lies, and even in the Sahaj Marg tradition, the birthdays of the masters, the masters celebrate it, and they'll read some of his teachings, but it's the transmission and the energy that's there that's important, right? That you receive this energy and you're uplifted, and there's some gratitude and some appreciation for the now dead master, but that's about all there is. And so Daji bringing in these other people, so that's the first thing. So he's bringing in this Sikh thing, which is a totally different religion. And no one knows, we don't know this stuff. But then he says this, beloved Daji warmly invites the Sikh community and the followers of Puja Tuktaji Maharaj to join him at Kanav Shantivanam for the celebration. He encourages you to invite friends and family members from the Sikh community. Now, again, he's trying to peel these people off. And these people have their own tradition, their own thing. People who, like my kids, for example, who grow up in Sahaj Marg, they have to choose it for themselves. And my kids didn't. And my kids definitely benefited from it. And, these things they liked about it when they were younger. But none of them chose it. And it was a real bummer for me. But you can't be a dick about it, right? Like, that's just their choice. That's the way it is. My biggest thing for my kids was that they became Abhyasis. That was my most important thing. I thought that they were going to be better than me, and certainly my ex, with all her bullshit. But I had hoped that they would exceed me in the Sahaj Marg system, because they grew up in it. They weren't going to have all the things I went through to become an Abhyasi. And when they didn't do it, it's a real bummer, right? But like, there's a brother and a sister whose dad practiced the system. I think their mom died. And they were cool kids. They were like in their 20s. They hung out with my kids who were in their teens. And they were, friends, especially the son, the brother. He was like probably 19 or 20. And his sister maybe was 22, 23. And, I talked to these kids a number of times, a couple times. And I was talking to this kid. He's really funny, just one of those naturally funny kids. And he said his dad met me and he wanted me to stay at his house with my family. He kept on asking us to stay. And, I'm like, well, I'm not going to go out to that part of the country to stay at your house, right? Because the guy, he was in charge of like a school on agriculture, and they had all these cool trees. We eventually went out there because of the flood, right? We went to that ashram. The flood in Chennai, and these people scooped us up. We were the last people to leave Chennai. Like I was trying to get on this flight to go to Sri Lanka to renew our visas, and it was a whole fucking thing. It was the last time we did it before we left India, right? It was a big, it was just the doors were closing in and just all these things, which I've talked about extensively in my Journey series. But there was no power, there was no water, there was no electricity, there was no internet, and the airport was closed. And we ended up having to fly out of Bangalore. We went to this city called Bangalore. It was supposed to be like one of these kind of almost smart cities, and they built the infrastructure. It was supposed to be this great city, and then all these people moved there and just wrecked it because there's too many fucking people. But we went to the ashram. The ashram was beautiful, but it wasn't, all that comfortable to stay there. We were going to stay there like a week. And I had this guy's number, and I called him, and he said, no, please come out to my university. And he had this kind of neat home, and the school was cool. It was like an agricultural school with amazing trees. And there was like a troop of monkeys, like these macaque monkeys or something, whatever they were, just wandering around the school campus, right? Like it was kind of cool, but the guy was a complete dick. Like he was just, two of my kids were sick. My daughters were both sick. My one daughter, we waded through the water, and it was filled with like fucking human waste. And I just, but she got sick, and my other daughter was always sick when we were there. She just was sickly, so my kids were sick, and I was trying to deal with all the stuff to do. I wanted to get the video up because I thought it would be big for my YouTube channel. I had all this footage of the flood, and I was trying to do that while figuring out I had all these, third-party apps trying to figure out how to rearrange our trip so we could get our visa. And it was panic mode, right? Like we had a week, and we'd overextend our visa, and we'd already done that, and that would have been bad. We'd have been like thrown out of the country. It would have been fucked. And so this guy, he wanted total praise. Like he just wanted like fucking us to kiss his ass. There's this whole thing about hospitality in the Indian culture. Like they're the most hospitable people in terms of the tradition. But this guy, like he came home from work, and it was like 10 o'clock at night, and he was cooking dinner, and he was rolling out these courses, and he wanted us to tell him how great it was. He wanted all this praise, and like, I'm like, oh my God, this guy had like a fucking ponytail, and just, and we had stayed at this other guy's house, and it was different but similar, and he was another piece of shit, and turned out to be a total piece of shit, like just a scumbag person. And we called him Toad from the Wind in the Willows. There was this character Toad, and this guy ended up being Toad too. Like my kids just immediately were like, "Oh, this guy's a night." We ended up leaving and going to a hotel, but we went back to the ashram, I guess, because we couldn't stand this guy. But Toad 2's kid, before that happened, said to me that that he his dad said to him, "If you don't start Sahaj Marg, you're not my son." He goes, so I wasn't his son for like 6 months. Like he was joking, like it was kind of funny the way he said it. But the guy's an asshole. Like you can't do that shit, right? You just there's no force. You're not trying to convert people. I talk about it here in a very light way. Like I think it's the greatest thing ever, and I think everybody should do it. But I don't fucking, I'm not going to press people to do it. Anybody in my family, I want everyone to do it. That's certainly my family members and everybody. But I can't force them to do it. Like it's just a disappointment, right? People just they either do it or they don't, or they either take to it. But it can't be because a family member forces it, right? And that's what Daji's trying to do here. He's trying to manipulate these fucking people, and he's trying to, pluck them like he's trying to, fucking pluck them from their religion. And that's totally not Sahaj Marg, right? And let's finish up the reading this thing here. It's wrong. Like, it's just the wrong thing to do. And the problem here, and the reason I got sort of irritated and some anger came up for me, is that everybody who reads the literature and knows Sahaj Marg knows that this is fucking wrong. It's wrong. It's disrespectful to Babaji. It's disrespectful to these other religions. It's not going to fucking work. It's moronic. It's like a Trump-like fucking thing. I've always had an issue with authority, and I wasn't born to the guru-disciple relationship. Like, I had issues with it, right? And I'm not a group person, and, I like to make fun of shit. I'm irreverent. I used to make fun of shit in Sahaj Marg too. Some of the weird shit people would do, or some of, whatever. I'm not, like, I wasn't bought in. And, it was hard for me to have, like, a spiritual master. It's just, it's being American and also being somebody who's just my personality type. And these people would weep. Like, when Charji would leave, they would weep, and they would talk about how much they loved him and, all this kind of stuff. I had amazing interactions with Charji, but some of them were rough. Like, they weren't great. And, I felt unsettled around him. Like, you could see right through you. And other people maybe didn't understand this or whatever. They looked at him like Santa Claus and whatever it was, but he was, just, beyond. And it was, intimidating. Like, it was, there was a thing there. And, when you went to see the master, you never know what you're going to get. Like, sometimes it would be something that was good, and then sometimes it would be deep cleaning that was rough, right? It was just those trips. And there was always some cleaning, and the cleaning's fucking rough. Like, it's brutal. Like, it's not it's not for the faint of heart. And, like, you had to stay faithful and get through it. And I went through some rough shit physically and emotionally and whatever it is. But, I know the guy wanted nothing but what was best for me. Like, he was just, above reproach, right? And, the gratitude I feel for what he did and all these things. And, even with my irreverence, there's things that I would never do or never, violate rules. And, I don't like like all these things. Like, there's just, and these people claim to just love him. And they allow Daji to shit all over him and do all this stuff that they know is wrong, and they fucking just go along with it. I mean, it's really like Daji being a piece of shit. All right, that happened. He failed, and it's a hard thing. Like, it's not easy to be a spiritual master. Like, it was not easy. Charji was an easy act to follow. The guy just came up short. Like, he ends up being a piece of shit. Like, that just happens. I couldn't have done, I would have done a better job in some ways, but I couldn't do that job. Like, I didn't want that job, and I couldn't do it. Like, I just, it's a hard job to do, and you have to be, like a special person. You have to have, impeccable character, and you have to, it's a difficult thing. And more saints, higher developed souls, the higher they go, the more chance they have of falling. It's just a thing. Human beings have flaws, and those flaws get exploited, and they get, empowered, and they, so I fully understand why Daji fell. It sucks, but he, and he failed, and, I talk about what a piece of shit he is, but I also have some, humanity and some understanding that it is an easy job to do. But all these other people that just, see what's going on and know it's wrong, and then they just go along with it. It's just fucking, it's really the worst part. And that has been, whatever it is. So, my headache's kind of dissipating now. I feel better, like, just whatever. Getting this story out. I'm going to put this in all 3 of my videos and wrap this gathering up here. It was an excellent, set of cleanings, and I'm very happy with it. And, and there's a whole gamut of stuff that went, it's all these things. There's a internal journey that you go on, and it's, it's an experience, and I'm grateful. I think these 7 sittings are, maybe the best ones. This has been like one of maybe the most powerful, given what's going on in the world and the rest of it. But anyways, that's it for now. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Power Man. I'll definitely pour in for the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.